You don't have to do the rule of thirds. You don't have to do the rule of thirds. You don't have... Hey, Ben Meredith here. You might be asking yourself, why am I in a bathroom? Hey guys, welcome to one of my last videos of beating a dead horse with the Nikon ZR.
Ridiculous.
Now, I will humbly admit I kind of piggybacked off the hype to gain a little more traction on my YouTube channel. So first and foremost, thank you everyone so much for subscribing and watching. If you haven't yet, check out my other content. Please hit that subscribe button. I am trying to build this channel out into a bigger filmmaking experience. That being said, this is probably going to be one of my last videos on the Nikon ZR specifically, as far as tests and comparisons and that kind of thing, because I think we have kind of talked about this camera enough. At the end of the day, it's just another tool, it's another camera. But I had one last test up my sleeve, and that's what this video is going to be about. It's comparing the Nikon ZR to one of my favorite mirrorless cameras, the Panasonic S1H. So why am I comparing these cameras? Well, first let's talk a little bit about the S1H. The Panasonic Lumix S1H is an older camera, but I still think it's one of the best mirrorless cameras that's ever been given to us. If I'm not mistaken, it's the only Lumix camera that has an OLPF built in, has a very pleasing cinematic image with amazing dynamic range. Now, I've worked with Panasonic plenty in the past, and the S1H is actually a loaner from Panasonic, but this video is in no way, shape, or form sponsored by Panasonic or Lumix. This is my own personal opinion and tests that I wanted to run to compare these two cameras. Panasonic loaned me the S1H about a year ago to shoot a documentary of people living on the Pueblo in Taos, New Mexico. I thought it was the perfect camera for that shoot because it was very run and gun documentary style, but I needed a good camera that captured a wide dynamic range in a variety of different settings. The S1H still boggles my mind every time I bring it in to resolve. The amount of detail you're able to pull back from the highlights and dig into the shadows is nothing short of phenomenal, especially for its H.265 codec. And because I had the S1H in my possession pretty much the last year, that's the main camera I've been using for all of my shoots. Outside of bigger projects where we might rent a Komodo or a Venice or an Alexa, I've pretty much used the S1H for all of my work this year, and it's held up very well. So in my humble opinion, the S1H is kind of the GOAT in small form factor mirrorless cameras that can deliver a very cinematic image. Although I don't think any small mirrorless cameras come close to something like an Alexa, I think the S1H is probably about as close as it gets. So I wanted to see for myself, how does the Nikon ZR stack up to the Panasonic S1H? So before we get into the test, I know how you guys get in the comments, so let me state some caveats here. First off, this is not a scientific test. I went with my friend Ness up in the hills of Los Angeles, and we just shot some quick sunset scenes. Additionally, this is an unfair test, so let me explain. It's unfair for a few different reasons. Reason number one, the cameras were using different lenses. I do have my set of Canon FDs, but I don't have duplicates of the focal lengths. So on the Lumix S1H, I used a kit lens. I believe it was the 20-60 f3.5-5, and we shot it zoomed in to 40mm. On the Nikon, we use what I'm using right now, the 40mm f2. Very budget-friendly kit lens that looks really nice. So there might be some slight differences in the color, contrast, and flares of the lens. That being said, I think the difference is pretty minimal. Both of these are very kind of neutral, clinical lenses on each camera. It's also unfair because of the ISOs I was shooting these cameras at. The S1H has a native ISO in Vlog of 640. The Nikon ZR native ISO is 800. So I dropped the Nikon down to 640. The reason that makes it a little unfair is because when you're shooting on Red RAW and you adjust the ISO, you're also adjusting where your dynamic range falls. So in Red RAW, the lower the ISO, you're actually putting more information into the shadows. The higher the ISO, you're putting more information into the highlights. Because I dropped from 800 to 640, it's conceivable that we lost a little bit of information in the highlights. And while we're going through these tests, I'll show you why that might be important. But again, the difference is very minimal. We're talking about maybe a third of a stop. And the last reason this test is extremely unfair, which I'm sure is going to ruffle some feathers, is I shot these cameras on very different codecs. So on the Nikon ZR, I used the Red RAW 6K full frame. I wanted the best of the best. On the S1H, I shot in 4K H.265 long GOP, which is a 6K downsampled image to 4K. It's one of their more data-friendly codecs that still holds up really, really well. Now, why did I do this? I did this because one, I've been using the long GOP H.265 codec on the S1H pretty much all year. I don't record externally to RAW on the S1H, and I don't even have anything to externally record to RAW. But in the past, I have tested the long GOP compared to the Alt-Intra compared to the RAW. And the long GOP holds up so well that I thought it would be fine for this test. I was mainly looking for the difference in dynamic range. And because I know the dynamic range in the long GOP codec is so good, I thought that's a fine comparison for me personally. I basically wanted to see, can the best of the best on this tiny $2,000 camera, red RAW 6K, hold its weight with the very amazing data-friendly codec on the S1H? Spoiler, it definitely does. The other thing to mention here is context. I've used the S1H, but I've also used tons of other cameras, from the highest end to the lowest. So I know where the S1H kind of falls within all the cameras I've used. For example, I've actually found that the S1H has pretty comparable, if not even a little better, dynamic range than the original Red Komodo. So when I make my comparisons of the ZR to the S1H, I can kind of simultaneously compare it to all the other cameras I've used. So let's just dig into the tests. First, we're just gonna look straight out of camera at the log images. So as you can see, both offer a ton of information in their log profiles. Now I'm going to put a color transform on both cameras that take it into DaVinci intermediate color space and then output to a Rec. 709. Let's see what that looks like. So as you can see here, straight out of camera with Rec. 709, the images remain pretty comparable. There's not some mind-blowing difference in the dynamic range, even though on paper the S1H has more dynamic range than the Nikon ZR. Now I should note, we are not trying to get these cameras to match. I didn't see any point in that. We're just looking at their detail, color fidelity, and dynamic range. So let's peel back the curtain a little bit, get a more aggressive grade on these, and see what we're looking at. So as you can see, which didn't surprise me, the S1H does seem to have a little more room in the highlights. The ZR does seem to clip a little sooner than the S1H. But this brings us back to lowering that ISO. It's very possible that lowering the base ISO of 800 to 640 on the Nikon ZR could have shifted that third of a stop or so of dynamic range in the highlights into the shadows. That being said, if you really look at these, we are splitting hairs here. I wouldn't say they're identical, but they're really close. And the fact that the S1H came out for I think around $4,000 and the ZR is $2,000 and you're getting a very similar dynamic range is pretty amazing. What you're also gaining with the ZR is that red color science, the ability to use a raw workflow and the red creative LUTs, and then you're getting all the other things that the Nikon ZR comes with that the S1H doesn't have. It's a lighter, cheaper camera with a massive screen, 32-bit float, amazing autofocus, a higher dual native ISO. It has a lot going for it. And I consider the S1H kind of the king of dynamic range in the mirrorless camera world. So I actually expected the ZR to do worse. The fact that it comes this close is really incredible. As far as color fidelity goes, I do prefer the ZR. I think that red color science is just tried and true. It's really beautiful. And as far as detail, well, these are both 6K cameras. The S1H is 6K downscaled to 4K, and the red is 6K, but we're on a 4K timeline. So I think both are pretty similar in detail. And then you have those nuances with red raw that you just can't really explain. Kind of the thickness of the image and the motion cadence. The readout speed on the ZR is quite a bit faster than the S1H, and I think that does aid in a slightly more cinematic image with the motion cadence. So even with that comparison, my thoughts on the ZR have not changed. I think it's an outrageous bang for buck, and you're basically getting pretty close to a full frame Komodo in a tiny $2,000 camera body. As mentioned before, this is probably gonna be my last video that's very specific to the Nikon ZR, and that's because I wanna grow this channel into a larger filmmaking community. If you haven't seen my other videos yet, I highly recommend you dig around. There's a lot of tips and tricks on all things filmmaking. Right now, most of it's specific to cinematography, but I want to grow it into talking about all things filmmaking. You'll see a lot of shorts in there, which are taken from my TikTok channel, but I figured YouTube's a better home for all this stuff to live. So moving forward, I'm going to make videos that are designed to live on YouTube. No more verticals. There's already tons of content on my channels for beginners and some for advanced, and I want to grow both of those. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit it right now because we're gonna come out with a lot more content this year and next year that are just all things filmmaking. We will still cover some gear because we love gear, gear is fun, but we're also gonna have lighting tutorials and cinematography techniques that I use on my sets, along with BTS, interviews, pretty much anything you guys want. And if there is something you want, leave it in the comments below. I think there's a lot of good content out there already for commercial cinematography and commercial production. On my channel, I want to have a more narrative focus, specifically with feature films. Those are very different than commercials, music videos, corporate work, etc. It's not just about making pretty imagery. It's about developing an entire cinematic language that you hold through the whole film, and creating shots that make your audience feel how you need them to feel in that moment. The other side quest of this channel will be taking you guys on my journey of making my first feature film next year. Everything from scripting and all things pre-production, into exclusive behind the scenes of the production itself, and post-production, which won't just be editing, coloring, and sound, but also what we plan to do with the film, how we plan to sell it, and where we plan to show it. I'm also going to be making this film in a pretty unconventional way, so I highly recommend following along to see that process. Okay, I know I kind of Trojan horsed the rest of my channel into this video, but I'm planning on doing a lot of exciting things next year, and I want you guys along for the ride. And no, I'm not going to tell you why I was in the bathroom.